When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. They're the home of the #1 checkout on the planet and the not-so-secret Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales happening. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds and Skims use. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/start selling, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/start selling to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/start selling. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. They're the home of the #1 checkout on the planet and the not-so-secret Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales happening. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds and Skims use. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/crimes, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/crimes to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/crimes.
All right, so we're back with my uncle's escape Alcatraz, and it's family day here. So we got unique guests. We have Ken's cousins, Tim and Steven Anglin, and their father is the infamous Uncle Man, Robert Anglin, who we've been talking about nonstop for almost 45 hours or 46 hours is how many times. So your father has been a pivotal person in this story, and it's really exciting to talk to you guys to find out more about him and what he was, what kind of man he was like, and then obviously, you guys have been listening to the podcast and you understand what, Ken and Mike and we are all doing here, and hopes to, hopes to kind of solve this crazy mystery that's been going on for 60 plus years with, your uncles, because you're uncles too, having escaped Alcatraz, and what we believe is they did it successfully and they didn't die in the bay, and that we're pretty sure that they made it to South America. And based upon some of the information that your cousin Ken and Mike and now us have dug up, we feel like we got a pretty good case that they lived out their lives in South America. So first of all, thank you for being with us. Why don't you, Tim, why don't you go first, and then we'll go to Steve. Tell me a little bit about yourself, and tell me, just, you can all like go back and forth if you want, but just start off with Tim. Tim, tell me a little about yourself.
Well, I'm Tim. I'm the youngest of the Robert Anglin children. I'm currently 54, just turned 54 in December. Still live in Florida, about 20 minutes away from the family property. My brother Steve still lives on the family property. I'm a systems engineer for an audiovisual and lighting company here in the area. Been there over, probably 13 years now.
Yeah. And how about you, Steve?
I'm 68 this year. I'm the oldest of the three, and I work for a construction outfit. I'm a general super or a project superintendent. So stay pretty busy with those projects, and it's everything's been going pretty good.
It's cool. So you actually own the family farm.
Well, I purchased it, and then in the past 3 years, I've actually gifted it to my youngest son. So he's going to live there when I retire and decide to start traveling around a little bit. So we're going to keep it in the family as long as we can.
That's fantastic. That's
awesome.
Great. So I got to ask you guys, I mean, we've been talking about this for a while. Ken and Mike have been digging into this for years now. What do you think about all this?
It's pretty exciting, especially all this new stuff that's coming around. I'm really excited to see where this is going to go.
Yeah,
I think the families always look for that closure, and it's pretty exciting that there is a potential source here of good information. So we're looking forward to being a part of this if possible.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your father, Uncle Man, Robert Anglin, to kind of paint a picture for us. And, Ken's painted a really good picture of it. I'd love to hear from your perspective and whether or not, he had shared any information with you as you were growing up, or if he just kind of kept everybody in the dark and it wasn't like that. Just kind of like, tell us some stories about him.
Well, he's a very kind and loving father, very good to all of us as we were growing up. He did tell a few stories, but he wouldn't give up a lot of information. He would highlight on some of the things that they got in trouble for and such. And, when we'd be at granddaddy's and grandma's, when they would get to talking about the situation, a lot of times we would be told to go out of the house. So they didn't want us to be listening to what was going on. So, they made the stories short and sweet.
He was always pretty cautious about what he talked about. He didn't let too much slip the lip.
And pretty protective.
Yeah, he was a good brother.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just escaped me what I was going to ask you. So Steven, how old were you when they actually escaped?
6. I was born August 13th of 57, and they left June 11th of 62. So I was about 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the family's initial reaction when they heard the news?
Not really. I mean, being that young, like I said, a lot of those times they sent us out of the house just to be able to have conversation amongst ourselves over that. So I didn't really remember a lot of that time of them escaping, as much as I remember going and seeing Uncle Alfred in Kilby Prison. I can remember that pretty well.
Tell us about that. What was that like?
Well, I mean, as a child, it was kind of crazy, being inside a facility like that with all the prisoners, and it was just it was kind of crazy to see all of that stuff as a child, So, but I do remember going up there on a Thanksgiving and taking Granny Anglin up there and sitting and visiting with them and all the guys in the white uniforms and such, So, that's,
yeah. How about you, Tim? What was your first memory of realizing that your uncles, not only were they in Alcatraz, but they escaped it?
Well, I mean, for me, all of that really kind of took place when I was very little. So, growing up as a kid, it was always kind of a cool story. Around school, some people would recognize the name and ask me about it. Of course, it was always kind of cool to repeat the story a little bit. But there wasn't a lot that I remember, other than just like Dad telling stories about what happened, and of course, later in life, the movies that came out, and then of course, much later in life, the documentaries that came out just kind of kept fueling that story.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, Ken, so when you when you contacted Tim and Steve about being on the podcast, and also we're not going to, I'll tell our listeners what special assignment that we gave you guys, that we mailed to you guys.
Right.
And, but we'll talk about that later. But so Ken, so what are your thoughts of like when you asked them to be involved and contribute to the cause here, as we call it, and what was that like for you?
Well, I really kind of wondered at first if they would be interested in participating, only because, we're talking about their dad. And, I guess I would probably be the same way if someone had a story about my dad and, was coming and asking me would I participate and probably pretty much kind of confirm some of the things that we've uncovered. And so I really didn't know what Steve and Tim were going to think whenever I asked them, and they were more than gracious to help, because it's like Tim said, the whole family really has been seeking to find the truth about what actually happened. There's no way that people can make me believe that what you see in the movies or the books that other people have written was what happened. And as Mike and myself dug into this, we found out that wasn't what happened. And, it's almost kind of like the other day I was watching a TV show. It was crazy. And they were showing scenes from California, and they were circling around Alcatraz. Of course, that's, very famous spot. And they started talking about Frank Morris, and they didn't even have the decency to mention our uncle's name. All they said was Frank Morris and 2 other prisoners escaped with him. Like, wait a minute, those 2 other prisoners have names,
exactly.
And they're more important to me than what Frank Morris did. And so here it goes again, Hollywood trying to paint out a picture that our uncles really were like some dumb farm hicks that, were gracious enough to be invited by Frank Morris. And we're proving that that's not the story.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, guys, brothers?
Oh, I mean, he's totally accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the stuff that I've seen out there is just ridiculous.
Yeah. They kind of painted Frank Morris to be the mastermind of it, so. And I think there's a lot more to that story. I think it was more John and Clarence that were the masterminds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to add one thing to that. Back to what you were asking, Ken. This meant a lot to our father. He paved the way on a lot of this. When he was still alive. Towards the latter part of his life, he got involved with different people with books and things of that nature. And it meant a lot to him to try to figure out what happened to him. So, for the cousins to take this on and kind of carry the torch, if you will, it means a lot. It means a lot.
But you've done a tremendous job on it, Ken. You've done really well. And Mike, and really thank you and Cindy for doing what you're doing, Rob.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's been
an
amazing story. It's such an honor to be able to tell it. Thank you for giving us that.
Yeah, Ken and Mike thought they were coming on for like one podcast to help promote their book. Little did they know that we sunk in like a tick.
Yeah.
Grab the hold.
And now,
It's just such a great story. And there's so much stuff I didn't know anything about, which I think is what you were alluding to earlier, is that, Hollywood just came up with this narrative early on and then they just ran with it. They didn't really do their research, dig in and find out who the other 2 brothers were and how interesting their story is, because that's the story. I mean, to us, John and Clarence were the masterminds behind this, no one else. I mean, they knew how to do this stuff when they were kids. That's why it's just so fascinating. We learn something new. It's like peeling an onion. We learn something new every week. It's like, oh, they did this when they wrote in code, or they knew how to talk to each other without a different language. It's very interesting how were.
Just recently, Ken, I was down visiting Ken and his mom, and she revealed the coded way that they used to give messages and how they did it. They would write in urine on paper, and then they would light a match onto the paper, and then they'd be able to see the message right before it went on fire before their eyes. I mean, it's like, Who
comes up with this?
comes up with that? I mean, that's just insane.
I think it's great.
You know, I mean, it's just the fact that they were so, they were so resourceful, and they were
creative too. I mean, that's the thing.
Creative. I mean,
super creative, super resourceful.
Look at
And
all
just-
the tools that they use to help escape with, fan motors and raincoats, and so it took a lot to put all that together.
in a very short period of time.
Exactly.
Very short period of time.
I mean, when you think about it, you see these, you watch Shawshank Redemption, and you see that kind of escape, which probably was inspired by your uncles, because they went through the same kind of way, not the sewage pipe, but the rest of it. But that his preparation went over like decades.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're talking about literally over a year that your uncles were able to do that, and I just think it's just fascinating. So getting back to your father, you may not know the answer to this question, but how much do you think he knew?
It's kind of tough.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, he would talk about it, but he would. I mean,
I think he took a lot to the grave with him.
I kind of
that
think
we
so
probably will never know, and that's where this is going on, and we need to find out, and get to the bottom of it so we can put this thing to rest.
Yeah.
One of the things my mom told me about Uncle Man, and I noticed that out of the times that I had been around him, was that Uncle Man was a very dedicated man to his siblings.
Oh yeah.
I mean, to the point that I don't believe he would have ever put any of his siblings in jeopardy.
No.
And especially, since they knew what the FBI was threatening the family with early on. I mean, it's recorded in the FBI files that as they interviewed each of the family members, they let them know right up front, if you know anything about anything, if you know where they are, if you have any information whatsoever, you don't share it, you're going to prison yourself.
Yeah.
And so, Uncle Man
was that being told.
Yes, Uncle Man was very protective of his siblings. So
Well, he was also the spokesperson for all the siblings. He done a lot of the speaking for all the siblings to the FBI and U.S. Marshals and such.
So you can imagine what he was probably protective of his own children.
Oh,
so if he would not share anything with his siblings, I very seriously doubt he was going to share anything and put his own family in jeopardy.
Right.
So, the things that we have learned about Uncle Man really, and his involvement in it, really kind of came from the FBI files. And then of course, the interview that Fred Breezy gave with the Anglin family in 1992, the way that Uncle Man answered the questions that his brothers and sisters were asking Fred Breezy, he pretty much answered the questions for Fred, especially like what it was like down in Brazil. It's like, okay, wait a minute. You're answering these questions in a way that, you undoubtedly have been there before, or you have knowledge that you probably shouldn't have about how the law was working in Brazil during 1973. So, that's where probably most of our information about Uncle Man comes from.
Yeah. Were you guys, Tim and Steve, were you aware of that meeting with Fred Breezy and the family? Were you aware of that?
Well, I actually took my dad over to Largo on a Sunday morning to meet with him. He wouldn't say who we were going to meet, but he wanted me to drive him to Largo. And then when we got to the address where Fred Breezy and his wife lived, Dad made me stay in the truck. So he was in there a couple of hours trying to set this thing up so that Fred Breezy would come to where Dad and Uncle Rufus and Carson and everyone stayed. So, it was, I do know about that and the interviews and such.
Yeah, because you were a man at that point, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I hope so.
What year was that? Do you remember?
Oh, gosh. No, not right offhand. I can't think of what year that would have been.
That would be 92.
No, okay. So I was going to say, because shortly after we went over to Largo, they did have that set up there at in Ruskin. So,
And they actually met twice. They met one time in like October, and then they met again in like December. During the winter. Yeah. So yeah, I think it was the second meeting that my mom recorded. So the recording we had was their second meeting, but they did talk about the first meeting in the second meeting, because you can hear them talking about Fred was undoubtedly, and I asked my mom this, and she didn't remember, and I wish I could go back and ask Uncle Man this. Supposedly, all of the family members asked questions that Fred taped and sent down to Brazil. The way he was communicating with them was almost kind of like the Bin Laden, stories, where he would record it. According to him on this interview, he would record it onto a cassette tape. He never said who the individual was that came by and picked the tape up, but they then would re-record it. In fact, he said it would get re-recorded a couple more times before it actually made it down there. And then they would respond in the same manner. So each of the family members asked questions. And I don't know to this day, my mom doesn't ever remember getting anything back. So, if there are tapes out there where they responded, I'm not sure what happened to it.
Yeah, because he had a small portable cassette recorder sitting on the table, I believe is what my dad had said, recording different things about that the interview, talking about in the interviews. So
it's crazy the way that Fred Breezy was still in touch with them in 1992. He was still communicating with them. This story that he flew down to Brazil, he ran into him in Rio de Janeiro in a bar. It was a one-time thing, he was still in contact with him. And between him and Uncle Man, they're the ones who kept John and Clarence up to date on the family affairs and what was happening. So, it's and I can understand how you would not want to share that with anyone.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I'd like to jump in with a question.
Okay.
And both of you can answer this. You said before a few minutes ago that he didn't share very much. He was very protective of keeping the secrets because he didn't want to put anybody in jeopardy. So he was sort of taking the heat for the family when the authorities would come around. But you said he did share a few things, that he would just sort of kind of every so often kind of reveal something. And I'm curious specifically what things he did share with you. Did he ever say that, your uncles were alive? Were they in South America? That they had successfully escaped? They survived? Anything like that?
He just one time that I do remember is that we were riding to work because him and I worked together, and he said those boys are out and they're alive, and he never really would go into a deep story about it, and he was kind of that way. You would be around other people and he would just make a comment about it, or somebody would ask a question and he would just briefly answer it, but he wouldn't go into a lot of deep details about things. And there again, I think that's part of that protective, trying to protect everyone.
Because one of the things that we do have that Ken has shared, that just when he was in the hospital shortly before he passed away, that he finally sort of to the family openly admitted that he had been in contact with them for the last 25 years, that they were alive. And I don't remember if he said they were in South America, but that he had been in touch with them for for decades, essentially.
Yeah, Aunt Merle told us that.
Yeah. Well, that was during the time I had been taking care of Dad when he come down with the dementia. And then we, Tim and myself and my sister decided we was going to put him in a nursing facility. And that's where he passed away. So my sister had spent the night there that night, and I was working nights. So I was coming the next day to sit with him like we would do toward the end. So there was a gap there between when my sister was there and when I got there. So Ann Audrey and Merle and Ann Audrey and her husband was there, and I believe Carson. So that could be very well that he did make that statement, but I was not there when that happened. So, we was in the midst of changing from my sister going home and getting rest and me coming on board to sit with him during the daytime hours.
What did you think when he said that to you that one time in passing, that he knew that they made it out and they're fine?
It's just, it was a good feeling. I mean, but there again, he would make these little comments about stuff like that, but he wouldn't never just really get into a storytelling about it, and there again, I just think he was trying to keep everything protective with everyone, especially his children.
It was difficult to decipher, if he knew something, or was it just that he strongly believed it. So, I'm not saying that he didn't know something. I'm just simply saying he believed that they made it. He strongly believed that they made it. So, but just never, at least to me anyway, he never outright made any kind of direct comment that he specifically knew.
What is really strange too about Uncle Man, and I keep calling him Uncle Man. That's the only name that I've ever.
Well, that's what he is to you. So
his real name is Robert
exactly
Anglin.
what you're talking about.
And if it wasn't Uncle Man, it was Man.
And that's the crazy thing is that even in the FBI report, they when he goes to visit Alfred in Atlanta, they write it down as Man.
Yeah.
So
his dad called him.
Interviewed
He
the
was known
individual
to
who was
Paul
given
as
the
his little
position.
man, so that's how he got the nickname.
And that's what's so crazy. I thought his name was Man for the longest time. I even asked my mom. I was like, when she told me what his real name was, I was like, "You're kidding me."
Well, he was known as Man and Uncle Man on the Anglin side, and then on my mom's side, on the Pickering side, he was known as Robert. So,
What's the origin story of him just being called Man?
well, when they were on the home place there and, gathering vegetables and stuff like that to go to the market, and, they were farmers. So he was Granddaddy's little man, and it just, he called him Little Man, and they just stuck with him. So, as the siblings just picked up on it and started calling him Man.
That's cute.
But what I was going to say was that, what is so strange about Uncle Man is that he is the only member of the Anglin family that has ever been polygraphed. All of the other siblings, none of them ever were asked to be polygraphed. And I swear, of course, the FBI reports were not released until the early 2000s. So, it took us a while in order to discover that he was in this FBI file.
Yeah.
Where he went to visit Alfred when he was in Atlanta. And, it's recorded down as he's the one who tells Alfred that they made it. And that not only did they make it, but that he even revealed who helped them make it.
Yeah.
He even brings up Mickey Cohen, which I'm like, the very first time I ever read that, I was like, how in the hell did Uncle Man know Mickey Cohen? It's like, I didn't even know
that. A lot of people.
Yeah.
But, the thing is that they believe, the FBI and the U.S. Marshals always believed that Uncle Man knew more than what he was saying.
Yeah.
Well, probably
it's obvious because they polygraphed him.
Probably about 7 years before he passed away, the U.S. Marshals come out to the house and picked him up and took him to downtown Tampa and wanted him to tell a story about, what if he knew anything and do a DNA test then. And Dad just wouldn't do the DNA test back then. He refused to do it. In fact, they sent him home with a kid in case he ever changed his mind. And probably I don't know, 3 years or so after he passed, and I went through all of Dad's belongings. There was that DNA test kit, and I threw it away because he just wouldn't give up the DNA, you know.
So take a guess at who the U.S. Marshal was.
Well,
Art Roderick.
probably somebody you knew that you spoken to.
Art Roderick was working the case at the time.
I know that Dad told the story that when they brought him up to Tampa, they come out and picked him up in a U.S. Marshal car, drove him to Tampa, and then when he refused the DNA test, they said, "Well, we're going to get you a taxi back to Ruskin." And Dad said, "I didn't come up here in no taxi cab. Whoever brought me here is going to take me back to my house," and they did. So, you know, he wasn't going to ride back home in a taxi cab after them coming and disrupting his day to go, you know, to speak to them about DNA and stuff. So,
yeah, why
would they do that?
Why would
Ken?
they need DNA? Why would they need DNA?
there again,
Maybe they were onto something.
Well, because they had the bones. Remember, they had the bones that they were trying to test.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So that's probably
Well, actually, no, they didn't find those bones until.
No, they found them about 9 months after the
2010.
escape. No, they found them 9 months after the escape, and then they buried them because they didn't know whose they were, and then they dug them up again later on.
Yeah, but that wasn't until 2010. That was
that was right. That was
US Marshal
Dyke. Yeah.
Yeah, he ran across a document where they had talked about the bones being discovered, and he went and had them exhumed. And that's how we get involved, is because at that time, Marshall Dykes wanted DNA from my mom in order to, because none of the other siblings were alive at that time except Aunt Merle and my mom. And so he was trying to see if we could get DNA so he could see if those bones belonged to one of the Anglins. Yeah. But, you know, we
Makes sense.
Yeah. So we eventually do it in 2015, but we do it with Alfred.
Yeah.
But
that you can't get that results from the U.S. Marshals or FBI, right?
No.
I seen that in your podcast here a while back, that they wouldn't give you that DNA.
Well, this is what the craziest thing is. Like the case is over 60 years old,
right?
Know? And the chances of John and Clarence or even Frank Boris being alive is slim to none. You know,
Right.
I would almost kind of say John is probably, if anybody lived the longest, for some reason, I always felt like it was John.
Right.
And he would be going, why in the world is the U.S. Marshal putting up all these barriers? They don't want to share anything with us. You know,
Right.
They don't want to, even the DNA they took from Alfred. Alfred was not even involved in the escape.
Right.
They still have his DNA today and won't give it back to us.
Right.
Won't even show us the results of it.
Wow.
It's crazy. I mean, it gets to the point. Now, I understand how my aunts and uncles felt about the FBI and then eventually the U.S. Marshals and not wanting to work with them, because we tried to work with them one time. You know, in the show with his channel, we were going to work with Art, and we were going to actually try and, you know, see if we could find out what happened. But it's like the U.S. Marshals just put up all these roadblocks to the point that I don't really care about even working with them anymore.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't want anybody stealing their thunder.
No.
Basically, at the end of the day.
I think that's it too, and I think that they did the documentary as a way to fish for information.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, was Art the one who told you they pulled Uncle Man out, or is that something you found out after the fact?
Well, I found out from Art, and I won't tell you how we uncovered the information, but we did know that Art was using Don DeNevy, who was working with the family at the time, to write a book, Riddle of the Rock. Believe it or not, Don DeNevy was working with Art and was going back up to Tallahassee every time he met with the family and was delivering information back to Art Roderick. So we do know that for a fact. And then Art is the one he's the one who answers the phone when Fred Breezy calls in. And he's actually the one who goes and picks Fred Breezy up and does the interview with Fred Breezy. Now, I do know that Art was the only U.S. Marshal during that time frame to be working the Alcatraz case. So if anybody would have interviewed anybody about anything to do with Alcatraz, it would have been Art Roderick.
Yeah. It's crazy stuff.
Did you remember when Dad and your mom and Jeanette went out to Alcatraz in 2006, I believe it was?
I do remember that.
Yeah. So they got to see a lot of things that a lot of the tourists that goes to that island that they don't get to see what your mom and my dad and Jeanette, Alfred's wife, got to see while they were there. So, they got to go up on the roof. They got to look behind the wall where they escaped and went up the chase. And, they got to see a lot of stuff out there that the public didn't get to see.
Yeah. Did your father share that with you?
Yeah. I mean, he talked about it, and I also have a newspaper clipping about it. So probably Ken's got the same newspaper because his mom is also at the bottom of the paper. So.
Yeah, she's the back rat.
Yeah, she's holding the boy's picture. But they were looking at the picture that's in the newspaper. They were up on the roof looking at the pipes where they shimmied down, and that was the picture that was taken of the three of them when they got to go out there. And Dad was really excited about that. He that was a highlight in his life to get to go to Alcatraz.
I bet.
Sure.
So I'm gonna ask Steve.
It's of course on my bucket list too. So
I'm gonna ask Steve a question. I don't even know this. I know some of it, but so Steve, I know that at the very beginning, your mom and your dad were living with Grandma and Granddaddy.
Yep.
Were they still living with them when the escape occurred?
Springfest deals are still in full swing at Lowe's. Right now, get 5 bags of Stay Green Premium Color 2 cubic foot mulch for only $10. And get up to 40% off select major appliances. Plus, save up to $300 when you buy 2 or more select GE kitchen appliances of $396 or more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 4/16, excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Selection varies by location while supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details and qualifying items.
Business taxes. We're stressing about all the time and all the money you spent on your taxes.
This is my bill?
Now Business Taxes is a TurboTax small business expert who does your taxes for you and offers year-round advice at no additional cost, so you can keep more money in your business. Now this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com/business. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
I think we had already moved into, Dad and Mom had we'd moved up onto our property, which, our house was right next door, into about a 50-foot mobile home.
Okay.
And then Granddaddy and Dad and my Uncle WC, they built our house. So I don't believe that they were living there at that time. I know that Mom did all of the boys' laundry, and they was all about their sport coats and white shoes. And, Mom kept all that laundry done for those boys as long as Dad and Mom lived there.
Right. Well, I also know that your mom, according to what my mom told me, is that she's the one who wrote all of the letters.
All of the letters.
Grandma would send to the brothers.
Yeah.
Her
Granny would walk down.
She didn't know how to read and write. So
yeah.
Aunt Billy would be the one who would write the letters for her and then send it off.
Yeah. And whether it be to Alfred or any of the other siblings, she did all of Granny Anglin's writing for her, and read the letters that would come to Granny because she couldn't read them. So.
Wow. Do you think your mom knew anything from your father?
Well, maybe. Maybe. But
Mom knows a lot about it, and Ken will tell you. My mom and Ken talked a lot back in when all this kind of got started. So, I mean, my mom did know a lot of information about a lot of things, and such. So, am I correct, Kenny, that you and Mom had spoke quite a bit on the phone?
Yeah. So you remember, Rob, when we were at my mom's and she talked about John and Clarence coming to the window at night, and my grandmother and grandfather seeing them. Well, Aunt Billy is the one who told us that story, and in fact, she said that she actually wrote it down in a letter or in a document that she wrote, and described how that they came back to the house. They didn't come into the house. They went to the screen window of their bedroom and spoke to their mom and dad and told them, they would not be back ever again. And, undoubtedly that's how they communicated with them for the last time.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, of course, we've all heard stories. Now, Steve, probably, he's a little old. He would have been older at my grandmother's funeral. I was only thinking how old I was. I was probably maybe 11 at the time.
Okay.
But,
I was right at 15.
So did you ever see two men dressed as women there?
Well, it being, we only got to go to a few funerals when you're, children. I don't remember seeing that. But my understanding is that the two women showed up after the wake and everybody had just about gone from the funeral home. Was my understanding about the story. But I don't remember seeing that.
So now you could talk about, according to what I've heard, and we put it in the book, Grandma used to get, according to what we were always told, right, so for my mom, she would always get flowers on her birthday. And that on the day that she was buried, when everyone got back to the house, there was a dozen roses on the table. Is that true?
Yeah, I do remember that.
They don't know where it came from. There was no card or anything.
No, I do remember seeing the roses on the kitchen table. So,
what about the Christmas cards?
I mean, Granny had so much stuff, I don't recall the Christmas cards, to be honest with you, Ken.
I can remember, there's some things I've told Steve. I don't know why I can remember things, but I do remember as you walked in, and I'm calling it the back porch because it was a screen door that would lead into the kitchen. Yes. And, if I'm sitting there visualizing it, I can see a table right in front of me as you first walk in, and there was a sink off to the right, and off to the left was a chest freezer. Exactly. And behind that chest freezer on that wall was all of those Christmas cards that Granny took and put up on the wall. I mean, I could see them as clear as day. But for some reason, that always stuck out to me. That, and I remember the hologram Jesus that, I told you that I saw in her house one time before. And I also remember seeing the painting that Clarence painted, because there was actually 3 paintings that got sent back to the house. 2 of them that John did, which was of Helen and Ruth. And then Clarence painted a rock scene with water crashing upon it. And they kept it in that back bedroom. Mm-hmm. And things like that, I remember, and I can visually see it right now in my mind.
Right. Yeah, I don't remember the rock painting, but I do remember the picture of Helen and Ruth.
Right.
So that house really didn't change over the years after she passed away. I was only about 5 or 6 when she passed away. So I remember the funeral a little bit, but really don't remember her much. But I can tell you, going to that house growing up as a kid, it was a time capsule. Yeah. It did not change by much at all.
Nope.
I mean, that table you mentioned sat in that very same spot. Did not.
Yeah. So,
but you do remember, Steve, that photograph of Jesus knocking on the door, the hologram? Do you remember?
Well,
that?
she had. So when Ken and I talked about this the other day, and she had several of those kind of portraits around through the house. And, Jesus with his hands together. And I mean, yeah, that seems to stick out to me. But she had 4 or 5 of those throughout the house, and each one was a little bit different.
Yeah.
And Granny was a religious person, so she liked to have that stuff in throughout the house.
Yeah, because what was interesting is that when I went to go meet Marie and Ken in Leesburg, as soon as I walked in there, on the ground right next to some other like photo albums or books like that was that same image, which came in the postcard. Yeah, exact same image.
Wow.
And then this one was like framed, and it wasn't a postcard. It was actually a piece of artwork that was framed, and it had a little Bible saying right underneath it. So it was like in this hard. So I was like, wow, this is the postcard.
Right.
The weird that they were able to find a postcard and send it to her with that same image. It's it's a clue. It's a way of messaging. It's letting them know that they're okay, and I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
To your point, it's code.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like the very first time I ever saw, or even suspected, or even heard about code had to be in the FBI files, because the guy who's giving the testimony about Uncle Man coming to see Alfred when he was in Alcatraz, in Atlanta. He says that that their brothers, John and Clarence, when they were in Alcatraz, wrote Alfred and told him that they were planning an escape. And I'm like going, okay, well, first of all, it would not have been just like, hey, we're planning an escape, because the guards who read the letters would have picked up on it,
Right.
It had to be something in it that let him know they were doing some type of an escape. And the guy even said that Alfred didn't hold a lot of hope that it could be done, because he didn't think anybody could escape from Alcatraz. So clearly they definitely did communicate in code. And even Uncle Man, when he was talking to that skip tracer, you remember, exactly, Frank.
He's the one that come to Rustin. Yeah.
That Uncle Man said that they communicated in code.
Yeah.
Wait, Steve, what did you say?
I said that I do remember Dad talking about the guy that Kenny's talking about, because Dad and him would go down to Hardy's to communicate, and that happened 2 or 3 times. So
did he say?
My dad saying that, because I'd go by and see him in the evenings and stuff on my way home from work, and I was like, "Well, what did you do today?" And he's like, "Well, I hung out at Hardy's for a little while. I had a visitor," and he wouldn't elaborate on what they talked about, but in a roundabout way, he was telling me that, he was there for a few hours and having communication with this person that Ken's talking about. So
yeah.
And the crazy thing is that Uncle Man shared with him, because this is documented in his document. Uncle Man shared with him that he received a postcard from Clarence from Brazil, written in Clarence's signature, and that Frank offered him $20,000 to see it. And Uncle Man came back the next day and said, "Well, it's been misplaced." And and the guy said, "Are you sure?" And he goes, "I'm telling you, it's been misplaced." And so I don't know if there, whatever happened to that postcard. And that's the reason why I say, when I asked my mom about that postcard, I asked her, I said, Uncle Man said that he received a postcard from Clarence. And she handed me that postcard that we just got through examining. She said, "This is the postcard he's talking about." I don't know. I can't explain to you why it has Ruth's signature on it, nor why it had a U.S. stamp on it and a Canadian stamp, but it does have male DNA on it. So we are going to find out what happens.
There was also the number 48. The expert emailed me the other day and asked if that number was significant for anything. It was handwritten, number 48.
48.
Right underneath where the stamp was.
Yeah,
that wouldn't ring a bell to me.
The
But
stamp.
it may have meant
No, no.
something to Dad or anybody.
Under the stamps, it's the number 48. Ken, I'll send you the email of what the picture.
So the U.S. stamp was 48.
No, the U.S. stamp was an 8-cent American
6
stamp. No, it was 8 cents. 8.
was 8?
8 cents. Yes, 8.
Okay.
And underneath the stamp was someone had written the number 48.
Oh, I didn't know there was anything up under it.
Yeah, I didn't know that until like literally 12 o'clock at night. So she sent me an email with a picture of it, and I was like, oh, that's interesting.
48.
Is it written in the same color pen as what the other writing was?
Wow.
Yeah. So it looks like somebody wrote that for a reason. That's what she was asking. And I was like, well, possible. It was everything they did was in code.
Yeah.
Well, it's like I said too, you know, they didn't go to a store and buy that postcard because that postcard has been stapled. I mean, you can see the holes in it. So I'm actually thinking that postcard came to someone in a letter and it was stapled to the letter. Because, like I said, why would you go into a store and buy a postcard that you're going to send to someone that has 2 holes in it?
Right.
And the holes are exactly the way that a staple would look, that it's been stapled.
Oh.
Yeah, but the postmark, the postage stamp, and the postmark is, if it was like stapled to a letter, then it would have been in a letter. So I don't know if there's. I think what that is
Then
when
why would you need?
I think that happened when the marshals had it. Didn't they have it?
No. I've got a picture of it before the marshals got a hold of it, and it still has the holes in it.
Oh, wow.
So the marshals, Art did not staple it. So Art's the only other person that had access to it other than my mom and me and now you. And those staples were in, I've got a picture of it before we gave it to Art, and you can clearly see those holes still in it.
Wow.
So, you know, if it came in a letter, then I would ask, why do you need a stamp on the postcard?
Well, maybe they sent that specific card because it was significant of something and it was stapled to a letter.
Or
Like, use this card when you're sending it.
could have that?
This could be the postcard that Uncle Man received. It just never was used. And it was used whenever they went. Because, you know, the strange thing is, like, this was at the exact same time that my grandmother died.
Right.
You know, it was mailed on the 9th of July, and Granny died on the 15th. Me and my mom were down with my brother David. We were down in Ruskin, staying that week with my grandmother when that postcard was mailed. And that postcard on it says, I hope you are still at your mom's. How in the world would they know that my mom was down visiting her mom?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
That's crazy.
Uncle Man.
Uncle Man was not was still there. He was there.
I really remember you guys being there that week because you left on a Sunday afternoon.
We did.
From Granny's and went back to Albany. And so we went to church that evening up in Palm River. And when we pulled in our driveway, Aunt Audrey's husband was standing in our driveway and told us to get over to the church. So we headed right over to the church, and there was Granny laying in the pew that she sat at every Sunday night, same place, and she had passed away. And so I distinctly remember my dad, when we got back home, calling your mom and saying, you guys need to turn around and come back. Granny has passed. So
it wasn't Uncle Man that was up in Canada.
No. I think the closest he got to Canada was Traverse City, Michigan, or Toledo, Ohio.
He did go to Michigan quite frequently.
The whole family went to Michigan.
There you go.
That actually leads to a question that I've been wanting to ask.
Okay.
So I had referenced earlier that he, you know, before he passed away, he said he'd been in contact with his brothers for 25 years. During that time, those many years, were there periods when he would just kind of disappear for a few days, just sort of go off somewhere and then come back and didn't say where he went from time to time?
I don't really remember him traveling, off by himself, unless he went up to visit his sister in Michigan, which was Mary Nell and her husband, Floyd, or at that time, she was married to someone else. But I don't really remember him just going off and being gone for days like that.
No.
But there was a time there, Dad and I, we lived together when we was living out in Texas. And when I moved away to go to Corpus Christi to work, he took over the house that him and I shared. And then his sister from Michigan had come visit, which is Mary Nell, and stayed with him for, about a month. But I don't really recall him just taking off on an excursion like that by himself.
He would go places, but he would usually tell us where he was going. How long he was going to be gone.
Yeah.
And sometimes he would stay longer, but he might plan to go to Michigan and he might say, I'm going to stay up there about a month, and he might stay 2 months. But he would usually let us know, like when he was traveling back. He stayed in touch with us. He didn't really just run off.
Yeah.
So
he had never been to California, though, huh?
Only in 2006 to go to Alcatraz that I can recall. So.
Did you know? This is the other question I want to ask about Breezy. Did Uncle Man? Because like they met, John and Clarence when they were young kids. Did Uncle Man ever talk about Fred Breezy when they were younger?
Now, my mom told you when we were with her that the whole Anglin family knew Fred Breezy growing up. And in fact, even my grandfather had met Fred Breezy. But I believe I have a photo of Fred Breezy with the Anglin family in a car way back when Uncle Man, he was really, really young. He's the one driving the vehicle. But if you look at the guy who is on the back, now I haven't, of course, had someone verify that this is Fred Breezy, but I swear, and I showed it to Mike, and Mike can verify it or back me up if he wants to. That guy looks just like Fred Breezy when he was that age. Now, we do know that according to Fred, he grew up at the same time frame. He lived near them when they were on the Alafai River.
Yeah.
He's even verified. My mom's verified they lived on the Alafai River. He talks about them swimming together. And then they were in Mariana together at the same time when John and Clarence went there for when they got in trouble for reform school issues. Actually, it wasn't reform school. I think they had broken into somewhere and they were juveniles. It was juvenile place. But Fred Breezy and his friend went there at the exact same time. So, they knew each other to the point that that it's not very hard to believe that he is the one who flew them out of the country. Because like I said, when you listen to the tape and you listen to how Fred describes, unless you were flying that plane, you would not have known the detail that he knew. Like he knew where they landed. He knew the time they landed. He knew they were refueling their plane. He knew where the location was. So, you don't know those kind of details unless you're the one there with them.
Right.
Yeah. And that airstrip is pretty close to the property, right? The Ruskin property.
The airstrip that Kenny was talking about in one of the later podcasts is it's about 2.5 miles from the family cemetery. Mm-hmm. And that landing strip is in a little edge of what they call Waimama. And basically it's been turned over. They do flying lessons and such there, but it's a grass field.
It's always been a grass field.
And it's been there forever. As long as I can remember, that airstrip has been there as a kid.
And that was where Fred crashed his plane when in 76 when he gets caught. So that's the airstrip that he was trying to land on with all the drugs that he was ferrying from Colombia. And he crashes the plane and gets into a shootout with some fishermen. And that's how he winds up getting caught. But that very same airstrip is where he would fly in and out of with his twin engine plane.
Well, you pass right by it to go out to the family cemetery. So, and like I say, it's been there as long as I can remember. You know, like the very first funeral that I think I ever went to as a kid was Uncle Alfred. And I do remember when he was brought down from Kilby Prison to Ruskin to be, you know, buried out at the cemetery. They actually brought him out to Pawpaw and Granny's house, and he stayed all of Saturday and Saturday night, and then Sunday they come and picked him back up and took him to the funeral home. Now they did things like that back in those days, and that would have been like the first funeral that I ever would have been to, and that airstrip was there then.
Mm-hmm.
So,
wow, Mike, did you have another question? I thought you.
No, I'd asked it about man. Although Ken had said that there was one time when he and his mother were invited to Texas to meet with some friends of his, and Ken's mother didn't go, and he sort of lamented that they didn't go because, you know, the friends could have possibly been John and Clarence because he lived right on the border, you know, right very close to the Mexican border.
Yeah, my mom had said that when Uncle Man lived out in Texas, that he invited my mom and my dad to come out, and he was going to take them fishing down some river that he fished on, and he wanted to introduce them to two of his friends. And so my mom and dad had thought about going, but the weird thing is that Uncle Man asked my mom to bring those paintings because he wanted to show those paintings to his friends. And he never said who the friends were. And my mom and dad never went, you know, but now she did say that Ann Audrey and WC went.
No, they did.
And Audrey stayed at home, and he took WC with him, and they went down, and he introduced them to whoever the two friends were that he wanted to introduce them to. So now I don't know who they were. You know, my mom.
Dad had a lot of friends out in Texas.
Yeah,
so
he did.
He knows a lot of people there. So he's just one of those type of people that you know, when he meets someone, he likes to hang with them. So he does have a lot of friends and family still there today.
You know, the strain of all of the stories that I've read in the FBI file, this one has always stood out to me. And it was this hotel owner, I think it's called the Hawaiian Royal, still there today. It's right at, I mean, if I looked it up, I could tell you what city it's in, but it's like right there at the border from the U.S. and Mexico. It's like a mile. And this individual gives an account of these three men. This is back like in the mid to late 60s, coming to the hotel, checking in. Two women came and joined them. They never left their room. You know, they ordered food in, and then they skipped out, never paid, which sounds like John and Clarence. And then when he notifies the authorities, the FBI comes. Most of it then is redacted, but they show him a photo of John and Clarence, and you can't see what he says because it's redacted. And then they compared the signatures on the file that the men signed when they checked into the hotel, and that's redacted. But it sure does make me think if John and Clarence wanted to come back and visit someone, that's the perfect place to visit, because it's like, you know, you're right there in Mexico. Here's the line. You were within a mile of the Mexican border. You could easily go back into Mexico and no one would even know you're there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, up until like 10, 15 years ago, I mean, I've walked across the Mexican border without crossing points, back and forth without anybody knowing. So it's like, you know, I can't imagine what it was like back then. It was probably super porous and very easy to jump back and forth of the border. No one's watching.
Well, I mean, you don't have facial recognition software, cameras everywhere. I mean, you know, at that point in time, they could have walked back into the United States and no one would even know who they were.
Right.
Oh, right. Yeah, for sure.
So anyway,
You have a question?
We're going to find them. I'm telling you, we're going to find them. We're going to find their graves, and we're going to solve this mystery.
That would be
Yeah.
awesome.
You mentioned something about a special project you had for Tim and Steve.
Oh yeah.
Oh, for me?
No.
Is it time to talk about that special
Okay.
project?
No,
Yeah,
let's
maybe
not
we'll-
go
let's
there
wait
right
on
now.
that.
Let's wait.
Maybe later.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, let's wait and see what happens.
Because it was
Okay.
referenced earlier and I didn't want to forget.
Yeah. So all I can tell the audience is that there could be a Easter egg that both Tim and Steve are
That'd be
involved
great.
in.
That would make
And,
me feel
Exactly. Exactly. Right. Maybe we might be getting answers right around Easter.
Yeah.
So that's pretty funny. So, but yeah, no, I think it's amazing that, Ken and both Tim and Steve, that, you guys are so open and welcome to talking about this subject. I mean, I know Ken has been dealing with it for a while now, and it's it's his opus, but it's a great opus because it's the one of the greatest mysteries, true crime mysteries ever.
Yeah.
And I think the work that him and Mike have done on the book and all the research. I mean, the fact that, I'm just learning about this hotel that you're telling me about. I mean, it's like there's so many things that are deep.
Every day.
Exactly. And it's just like the fact that, that was redacted in the FBI report.
Why is it redacted?
Why is it redacted?
I mean, that's the thing.
Right.
What is it redacted
His
for?
reaction, his testimony. Why is it redacted?
Like there's no reason for that.
Right.
At this point, I mean, it doesn't. They're really.
And why do they want DNA? I mean, that's the thing.
Exactly.
It's like, what? Okay, fine. The bones, fine. Okay, fine. But then what else is going on here? I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, they wanted the DNA after they talked to your father, Steve and Tim, and they asked also when Ken went to Alcatraz for the first time.
Right.
They asked it then.
Yep.
Why are they asking for DNA?
Yeah.
If
Well,
they
I guess a possible theory to that would be that DNA testing wasn't a thing, and until I don't know what
2001 when it first came into
Yeah.
So they probably wanted something at that point to have something to compare in case they found something, or maybe they had something that they wanted to compare to.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's all very, I mean, there's so many ways. I mean, we've talked to, and you've heard these guys on the podcast, former federal agents, FBI agents, U.S. Marshals, and they don't understand why they don't come clean. At this point, I mean, like I said, they're in their 90s. If they're still alive, this case basically gets shelved after they turn 100. So you're not too far from that.
Right.
And why not just come clean with this stuff? I mean, they came clean with the JFK files. I mean, this is way less controversial than that.
Right.
Sure.
Or maybe it isn't.
You think it is.
Right. We don't know.
Like I said, I think once we uncover everything, we're going to find out. And I've always believed this: the FBI has always known where they were at.
Yeah.
I believe they have always known where they were at, and there was a reason why they kept them where they were at.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you think that they kept them there, or do you think it's because they couldn't take them from there?
No, I believe it was to their, at least this is my belief, I believe it was to their benefit to keep them where they were at. When you start looking at how they got out of Alcatraz, the different events that occurred, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States is involved in this. It has a part in this story. And so you go all the way through these people that are involved in this story. There's something more to it than what I think we've even uncovered. I really believe there's another story embedded into this Alcatraz story. And I think one day we'll actually find it.
Yeah, I spoke to someone who was on the LA's gang squad unit, like in the mid 70s, and he had just come on there. But his partner at the time, it was on there from like the mid to late 50s all the way until the the late 70s. And they had so many files on Mickey Cohen, and they had so many bugs all over his places. They found out, Mickey Cohen was like one of the first guys to buy a color TV, and they had bugs. They had bugs in his house, and he was bragging that he's going to go buy the first color TV. So they found the place where he was going to buy it, and they went there, and they said, "Listen, this guy's going to call and want the color TV." He goes, "When he does, call me." He goes, "We're going to deliver it for you." And so they put a bug inside the TV. And so they have so much information on him. He says that where those files are, they don't know. He told me that there was a point where in the early 80s, and the chief of police at the time, I can't remember who it was, but he was given orders to shred everything. And so he said he spent a month every day, 8 hours, shredding everything in those files. So he doesn't sure what's left of it, but he did say that, Mickey Cohen was responsible for, he didn't physically do it, but he was responsible for the murder of Bugsy Siegel. So it's like the tentacles to this case is just, it's like an octopus. It's like the fact that your uncles had a connection to one of the most powerful mobsters at the time, and that also connects to the Kennedys and the Kennedy assassination. And also, it's like mind-numbing. And all this stuff happened at the same time. Yep. 62, 63, it's just, and the fact that, like Ken was saying, is that, and we've asked this of government officials and federal agents, and never at any time has a chief justice of the Supreme Court, the chief justice, by the way, signed a post a bond or allowed for someone to get out of prison. And he signed it.
No way. A criminal.
A criminal. Not only just anybody, but one of the most powerful mobsters that the Kennedys put in there.
Kennedy brothers put there.
So there's so many things going on. And, obviously the work that Ken and Mike have done really reveal the Mickey Cohen connection, which like you have the two people, I think the two pivotal characters in Your Uncle's Escape is Fred Breezy, who was the one who we believe introduced them to Mickey Cohen. And then you have Mickey Cohen,
Right.
And then you have like the who's who. You have Whitey Bulger, who was, they were housed with at Alcatraz, and also Bumpy Johnson, who was the godfather of Harlem, who so many key figures that center around this escape that they wanted that they wanted to succeed, that they, no matter what.
Right.
What else was behind that?
Right.
It's insane.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, there's more to this story than what we've uncovered before.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And then I like how, it's really kind of a crime that it's in the fact that Mike and Ken have been able to write this book, which is great because it's always been confined to like just the escape, Frank Morris, and two other guys. And when that was the thing that was fascinating about the book when we were reading it, is that the backstory and the way both John and Clarence were raised and how it was like almost their destiny that this was going to happen. They started out as, little kids just getting in trouble, and then things would escalate and they would do it. They weren't mean kids. They didn't want to hurt anybody. They were risk takers, and, they were poor kids. So they didn't want to be poor anymore. So they figure out a way how not to be poor. And the fact they were so clever at it and using all their resources. I mean, they robbed a bank with a toy gun. I mean, that's pretty freaking risky. It's like, so it's like, what if they walked in there and someone had a real gun? It's just like, it's like the old thing, putting your finger in your pocket and going like that. It's like, it's like ridiculous. It just doesn't make sense. And then the fact that they were able to escape pretty much every place that they put them in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the level of, ingenuity and tenacity and fearlessness that you have to have. And they would do it even if they weren't together. If they were separated, it didn't make a difference.
Right.
Yeah.
So
they were deadly when you put them together.
Yeah.
They were a power couple when you put them together.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. And I remember Ken, in one thing where Ken said the letter that the warden at Leavenworth, who sent to the Alcatraz warden warning him, said, listen, you guys better watch out for these guys. And he didn't listen.
No, he didn't. Put them side by side. That was.
I was going to say that's the craziest thing. They put them side by side.
Exactly. It's crazy. I mean, just lastly, Tim and Steve, what's your overall feeling about all of this stuff? And this is your family's legacy. It's a crazy legacy to have.
It's a legacy for sure. It's a legacy that I would love to see come to an end, especially, Ken's mom is getting up to be close to 90, if I'm right. And Aunt Merle is 87. And I would just love to see this thing get something, some closure for them.
Right.
They're the last two remaining siblings. And yes, it means a lot to us, and Ken,
but not as much
as
it would.
Not as much as it would be for them. Exactly.
Yeah.
So.
And do you guys have children as well?
Oh yeah.
What
I have 4, and I've got 6 grandkids, and one will be born, a new one, and his middle name will be Robert. So June 24th, I believe.
That's great.
I've got 4 children and 3 grandchildren.
Oh, nice.
Do you share any of these stories with them, or is it kind of way over their head? It's just kind of like.
Well, it's kind of interesting because sometimes when I pick up my grandson and my 2 girls, I'll go over and get them. And right behind my seat is Dad's scrapbook, which I have laying here beside me now, with all the newspaper clippings and such. And then the Don the Navy book that was out, it's also in my truck, and the one that Ken and David wrote. And so they'll get it out, and I'll hear them conversating back there. Papa, was these really our relatives that did this and stuff? And they're just like 11 and 9, and 6. And, so, yeah, I mean, it's a little early, but they pick up on those things when they, we're riding around and they get the books out and look at all the pictures and, hey, is this Big Papa? And, and that kind of stuff. It just, it's makes you feel good.
Yeah. I mean, there was something that just came in on news on CNN did this morning. I found on TikTok where this, scientists took what LIDAR is, where they can kind of 3D scans like buildings. They did that thing where they found all those structures underneath the pyramids and stuff like that. They did the same thing for Alcatraz, where they flew this LIDAR drone through the entire prison. And I'll send this to you guys. And, it was all about, kind of reconstruction, because I guess they're having Alcatraz is having the water tables rising or something like that. So they want to see how much they can preserve digitally. And of course, the final story they did was they traced the escape through with the drones and the LIDAR living it. Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. That would be neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like it's never going away, this story.
Right.
So did they take it to the pier and then they follow the boat out to the middle of the bay? Did they end it that way?
No, they stayed within. Yeah, they stayed within the prison where they.
Okay.
They took it right up until the air vent, and that was it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They started with the little inside their cell through the vent, and they went through there. But I thought it was interesting that, it's like I can't escape from Alcatraz. I can't escape from Alcatraz.
Right. They're going to tell the Alcatraz story, and they always have to tack on the escape because that's what
right.
Can't.
It's not going anywhere. Well, gentlemen, it's been wonderful. So and thank you so much. We'll be talking more soon.
Okay.
And Ken and Mike, obviously we'll see you next week.
Well, it was a pleasure to meet you all.
All right.
You too.
Thank you.
Take care. Here.
A lot of products say they're clean, but what does that mean? Ritual has high standards for what clean means, like their essential prenatal multivitamin, which is heavy metal tested, clean label project certified, and GMO free. It features key mom-to-baby nutrients like folate, choline, and omega-3. Clean isn't clean enough. especially during pregnancy. Get 25% off at ritual.com/prenatal. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.